War. War never changes. Those were the words spoken from the iconic video game Fallout. Indeed, while weapons and tools of war evolved and improved, the elements that fueled conflicts never changed, like survival, vengeance, hatred, and conquest. So too is our fascination with war. Even today, war stories are still one of the best entertainment around. We are fascinated by the adventures of heroes and warriors who left many enemies dead in their wake, in the fight for their country, race, love, or simply just for pure badassery. In the realm of comics, war stories have had quite the history, from being propaganda comics, being one of the most popular at their time, to now being nothing more than a niche genre that still holds respect. War comics are an integral part of comic book history. And in this episode on our channel, we will tackle the longest running and certainly the greatest war comics of all time. Commando for Action and Adventure is a British comic book series by DC Thompson that began in 1961 and continues to be published today. It started off as one of many war comics that was inspired by World War II. It had only been nearly 20 years since the war's end, and as such, the tales and exploits of heroes fighting against Axis encroachment were still fresh on people's minds. There were many World War II comics at that time, like Our Army at War in the US and War Pictures Library in the UK. Commando Comics arrived much later than these titles, but unlike them, it focused on missions conducted by the extraordinary special units of the British military in World War II, the so-called British Commandos. Their operations became one of the first special forces missions in modern military history. The British Commandos were established after the failure that was the Battle of Dunkirk in 1940. Knowing that Great Britain could not compete with the advanced technology and military prowess of Nazi Germany, Prime Minister Winston Churchill decided on a different strategy. Instead of traditional warfare and pitch battles, the British Army focused on asymmetrical and semi-guerrilla warfare involving raids. In that same year, a specialized group of men were trained to be inserted behind enemy lines, kill as many Germans as they could, destroy vehicles and infrastructures, gather intel, and get out before their enemies could counterattack. They became known as the Commandos, and their missions inspired many Britishmen. Commando Comics took its name and much of its stories from these soldiers. Commando Comics released its first issue in July 1961, entitled Walk or Die. Throughout the years, many great writers and artists have contributed to making its stories, such as Gordon Livingstone, John Ridgway, Alan Hebden, and Ricardo Garijo. Issues of Commando Comics also involve other branches in the British Armed Forces like common soldiers, brave sailors, talented pilots, cunning spies, to even courageous civilians like medical professionals and reporters. While the series initially took place in the European theater of the Second World War, it soon delved into other settings like the Pacific War, First World War, Spanish Civil War, and a myriad of other conflicts that Great Britain took part in. Its style of black and white art, cheeky British humor, and a durable pocket-sized spined book make for a great piece of sequential art. Each story portrays both the positive and negative traits of military life, from values like bravery, discipline, honor, and compassion, to immoralities like greed, selfishness, brutality, and war crimes. Various military exploits are well portrayed, from the tragedy of a British soldier finding out about his German heritage, to the audacity of taking out U-boats in the seas. And the series would continue publishing these stories for more than 50 years now, reprinting a few classical ones, while also creating new stories for newer generations. While other war comics fell and faltered, Commando Comics survived the test of time. And another thing that made this series so legendary, and the fact that made it the greatest war comics of all time, is that throughout the decades of its publication, it actually inspired people to join the British military. Journalist Matthias Nelson stated, "Commando Comics is one of the greatest war comics ever written, and I myself knew people who were inspired by it to actually enlist in the British military." Conventions and galleries about its art were built, and many artists and writers in mainstream comics like Garth Ennis had also been inspired by this series. Truly, Commando is a spectacular and iconic war comic, and with passion and an eager fan base, will continue to thrive in the decades to come.